Hello and welcome to News Hour. I'm Marcel Gordon. It's great to have you with us. We'll take a look at the top stories and tell you how they impact the business bottom line. In focus tonight, government's long-term plan on energy includes more alternative power plants, fewer coal plants and no significant change on nuclear supplies. And on a lighter note, Yang the panda is making a few euros on the side through her paintings, all for a good cause, of course. But first, other stories making headlines. The DA's Athol Trollip is out and the UDM's Mangomele Bobani is in as Nelson Mandela Bay's mayor.
Athol Trollip has been removed in absentia because they have left the council chamber. Can Councillor, the new elect, Councillor Mangomele Bobani, come to take the seat of the executive mayor?
A day of drama there at the council chamber in Port Elizabeth. First, the DA speaker was voted out, then Trollip was replaced by Bobani in absentia. Student leaders at Tshwane University of Technology want the institution and police to take responsibility for the death of a student in Shoshonguve. Deputy Police Minister Bongani Mkongi has held a meeting with student leaders and university management following the incident last Thursday. Violence erupted after claims of vote rigging emerged during the SRC elections, prompting police to be called in. Several suburbs of Johannesburg will still be feeling the after effects of a fire at a substation. The city power substation caught fire in Aikenhof, south of Johannesburg. This resulted in power outages in areas like Naturena and Kibler Park. It will also affect water supplies due to pumps being out of action. It seems the fight is nowhere near over in the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. The Democratic Alliance in the Eastern Cape says today's sitting, which saw Athol Trollip voted out of his mayoral seat, was illegitimate. Eastern Cape leader of the DA, Nkaba Banga, says they're ready to head to court.
What we're doing, we're going to do our work. If we need to be, we'll challenge it in court because it's illegal. It's not in line with the Constitution of the Republic. You could see it for yourself that there was no city manager in that meeting. There was no secretariat from the municipality. There was just this official imposed from a provincial government, meaning implying that the provincial government, which is another sphere of government, was presiding in another sphere of local government. It talks a lot about the involvement of the provincial government. It's destabilizing the Nelson Mandela, but we're focused. Because we are doing work as a city in changing the lives of our people. Nelson Mandela is a construction site, and we're not going to turn it back into our people because we've delivered services, and Athol Trollip have been doing a great job. We'll do everything in our power to make sure that the Nelson Mandela municipality is not stolen again.
Meanwhile, the UDM is rejecting the DA's version of events in Port Elizabeth. It also says the decision by DA member Mbulelo Mnyati to abstain from voting in the initial no-confidence motion that ousted Speaker Jonathan Lavak is entirely the DA's problem. The UDM leader spoke to Shaun Ramkasoon earlier.
We need to reject the DA's version of events. Everybody was watching the activities in that council. First and foremost, the leader of the DA, James Self, has no power to write a letter just to say to the municipality, this person who has voted 30 minutes ago has been expelled because he has voted against them. Secondly, the municipal manager has no powers to declare that post vacant. It's only the IEC who can do so. The truth of the matter is that that gentleman used his conscience and voted against his own political party. It's recorded. What happens after that is none of our business.
Changing gears now, details of the country's much-anticipated integrated resource plan have been revealed. There'll be a greater focus on renewable energy, while nuclear is taking a backseat for the next 12 years. The draft IRP policy outlines the country's electricity plan, given the demand outlook until 2030. John Bailey has more on that story.
The Integrated Resource Plan foresees the energy mix in 2030 will consist of almost half coal power, with gas and wind being the next most important contributors. Government says electricity demand on the grid has been declining annually.
For the financial year ending March 2018, the actual total electricity consumed is about 30% less than what was projected in the IRP 2010. Eskom existing generation plant performance is not at expected levels. Eskom's own reports show that plant availability is below the IRP 2010 assumptions of 80% and above.
The IRP is a 20-year energy blueprint to meet the country's future power needs. Coal's installed capacity will be lower than the current installed base, but it'll still contribute the most energy volumes. More emphasis will be placed on renewables. The balance of energy volumes will consist of pump storage, concentrated solar power and nuclear, which will contribute only 4%. The draft IRP only includes the 2.5% installed capacity provided by the Koeberg nuclear power station. With renewables getting a bigger chunk of the energy mix, it will impact on the coal industry and specifically jobs.
A just transition requires that while we move with speed to respond to the changing landscape, we also take calculated steps to ensure we leave no one behind.
A study will be done to look at the socio-economic impact of the decommissioning of the old coal-fired power plants that will reach the end of their lives. The public and stakeholders have 2 months to provide the Energy Department with written comments about the draft IRP. It's expected that by the end of the year, there will be policy certainty and clarity about the country's energy plan for the next 20 years. John Bailey, Pretoria.
Now, the country, as you heard, there is moving towards a more diverse energy mix, according to that plan. It does, however, seem that coal will still be the major energy resource until 2030. Independent energy expert, he acts as the mining and energy advisor, Ted Blom, now joins us via Skype. Ted, thank you so much for joining us. Now, if you look at this integrated resource plan announced today, have they got this so-called diverse mix correct?
Good evening. I'm afraid that I'm not in agreement that this is a workable scenario. If they take out 12,000 megawatts of the cheapest electricity in the country, which is coal, then the average price will increase drastically. And I anticipate that under these scenarios, you and I are going to be facing an energy price increase of between 3 and 4 times before 2022. The 300 to 400% price increase in electricity tariffs before 2022.
Now, where would they have jiggled the numbers then? If the information that you are quoting is correct and based on research, one would think that they would be privy to the same information. What are they not telling us?
Okay, so there are a couple of misdemeanors going on here. The first is that this whole scenario has been run on a Australian platform called Plexus. And if you go and look at Australia, you'll see that they over-relied on renewables, and that led to the collapse of the electricity system in the past 12 months. And that's why other people had to jump in to try and rescue them. At the same time, their tariffs also went up substantially, because at the end of the day, the fact is, these renewables are on a take-or-pay basis, whether we need them or not. So if they blow at 12 o'clock at night or whatever, and there's no energy requirement, we have to pay for that energy that's not being used. And similarly, because they're not available when we do use them, or they're unpredictable, they cause massive fluctuation in the grid, and they have to be supplemented with backup power, which has to be available within milliseconds should the wind blow or not blow, or the sun be obscured. So at the end of the day, whatever you do in terms of renewables, you cannot run a baseload industry like mining or smelting or anything based on renewables, because it's not consistent enough. So you have to run backup power. At the end of the day, you're running double the cost or more just to keep it at the same output. And that's been proven worldwide.
You're speaking there about the danger of an over-reliance on renewables at this stage in the game. But according to that report, coal is still going to be very much front and center. According to that report by John Bailey, they did say 46%. Now, obviously, we're jiggling numbers here. So 46% in comparison to the others seems like a greater amount, but you're saying you still think that there's too much of a reliance on these renewables at this stage.
Well, just let's forget about the percentages for the moment. Coal is going to be cut back to 31,000 megawatts. The South African economy used to use 34,000 megawatts, but since 2008, because we never recovered from that recession, we're down to about 29,000 megawatts, with maybe a peak going up to about 31 on the odd day. Now, the fact of the matter is that that's the maximum coal available, but that's theoretical. Eskom has not been able to achieve 80% availability over the past year. In fact, has been down to about 60-something in the past 5 years. So of that 31,000 paper megawatts available, only about 25,000 of that is actually usable at any one stage because of breakdowns, etc., etc. Now, if we are running an economy that needs 28, 29, 30,000 megawatts base load, and we rely on the top-up, the other 5,000 megawatts above coal, to come from renewables, what do we do on a day where it's cloudy or there's no wind blowing or it's raining? Because when it rains, it's cloudy and there's no wind blowing. I mean, you then have to decide to shut down your economy. And that, for most industries, is not feasible. You cannot have...
Now, let's talk nuclear. Sorry to interrupt you there, Ted. Let's talk nuclear just for a second before we let you go. According to that report, they're saying that nuclear is being put on the back burner for the next 12 years. What should we make of that, especially looking at nuclear being a major political hot potato in South Africa as well?
Okay, so to be blunt, I've spoken to industry insiders from the department and from Eskom, and it seems to me that we've just had one capture replaced by another capture. The nuclear was captured, we all know that. The costs were projected were horrendous. My estimate at the time was nuclear should come in at about 250 billion rand for the 9.6 gigawatt configuration that we're talking about, with an alarm ringing at 500 billion. If it was, but I mean, the government, Mr. Zuma's administration was talking about over R1 trillion. So obviously that was a farce and a big corruption ripoff. But by the same token, now we're being captured by the renewable gang, because the stuff that they're putting on the table is also not sustainable. And it's also causing the price trajectory to go to over 3-4 rand a kilowatt hour from the current 1 rand and 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So there's something very, very wrong there as well. And I don't know how we sort it out. I don't know if the Zondo Commission can sort it out, but I've called for a forensic audit of Eskom. And this government is too chicken to go and do it because they're scared of the worms that will come out. Only then will we know exactly what the cost of electricity should be.
We'll leave it there for now. Independent energy expert there joining us via Skype, Ted Blom. We thank him for his time at this hour. Moving on now, the Freedom Front Plus says the party is not opposed to land reform, but it warns that without compensation, land expropriation could destroy South Africa. The party has announced its plan of action to fight land expropriation without compensation. Nadine Tron reports.
An SMS helpline, a complaint with the UN's Human Rights Commission, and a presentation to the American Embassy. These are parts of the Freedom Front Plus's action plan against land reform without compensation in South Africa.
The expropriation without compensation is a violation of Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and therefore we have to ensure and put as much pressure as possible to prevent the ANC to amend the Constitution.
The Freedom Front Plus's Pieter Groenewald says the party has been invited to deliver a presentation at the American Embassy about the land issue.
We from the Freedom Front Plus understand that sanctions is a sensitive issue. It is damaging towards the economy. But then you have to make a decision. You have to choose between two evils. And we say that we hope that the ANC will come to their senses to realize that expropriation without compensation is not the solution, and therefore prevent sanctions against South Africa. But I want to put it quite clear. If it is necessary that we have to request sanctions against the South African government to prevent them and to not change the constitution, we will do so.
Groenewald says the party will also use the helpline to collect data about illegal land grabs in South Africa to present this to government. Nadine Theron, Cape Town.
Now, 4 of the big agriculture sector unions say they will work together on the land reform program. The unions, Agri-SA, AFASA, NAFU and TAU, say they will host an agricultural indaba. They hope to use the platform to draw up a national development strategy for the sector. Deputy President David Mabuza says this is an important step. He says it will help government to achieve transformation in agriculture. Now, Telkom claims it won't be able to compete with bigger players, MTN and Vodacom, should ICASA slash termination rates, and even worse, may have to cut its workforce to cope with the tariff cut. Mateo Koripe joins me now to chat about this and other top stories for the day. Mateo, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what could the loss of those termination rates really mean for Telkom?
Well, for a player that's always been in fixed line operation, Telkom came in late in terms of mobile, and what has been happening in terms of termination rates is basically the rates that these companies charge each other for connecting across networks. And Telkom has really enjoyed, at least for this short time, to charge higher rates to MTN and Vodacom for connecting their subscribers to Telkom, and that has been a part of their revenue generation. And with ICASA coming in and saying they're going to be slashing those from 12 cents to 9 cents for mobile and from 8 cents to 3 cents for fixed line operation, then it means that for them, they'll have to find the money from elsewhere. This is obviously going to hit them in the pocket because asymmetry as well, which is a part where Telkom now has to pay higher rates to Vodacom and MTN to connect, will also hit them as well. And the CEO, Sipho Maseko, saying that, in terms of operation, yes, they can provide the service, but they're not making money from the service. And if they can't make the profit, then obviously jobs will be first to go for them to try and cope with the regulation.
Now, on that, is it just me, but it seems to be in the fashion at the moment. If an organization thinks that their business is under pressure to perform, they say, oh, if you make this regulation, we're going to lose jobs. I think of MultiChoice saying that they might have to cut jobs if Netflix isn't regulated. But the most important question should be around the user and if it will bring prices down for them or give them better services. Surely it must be a good thing.
ICASA is playing its role in terms of looking out for the user. But let's just put it into perspective in the telecom sector. The likes of MTN and Vodacom currently operate at around 10,000 staff, and Telkom is at 18,000 staff, and they're not making the biggest bucks in the game because MTN and Vodacom obviously dominate in that sector. And, Telkom really saying, the regulator has to look at them and Cell C, who's also been making losses as well in terms of how these tariffs can be adjusted so that the smaller players get to be looked at much more than in the likes of MTN and Vodacom, who get their rates from the likes of data, services as well, and they make more billions than the two that are smaller in the game.
I'm sure you'll keep a tab on that development there. Let's look at the news coming out of the private education sector. The company Advatech releasing somewhat decent results today. I've heard various reports on it throughout the day, but the high standard of living impacting its bottom line.
Definitely a high standard of living would obviously hit a company like this. I mean, Advatech, not really known by many people, but the kind of products they have in the company, a lot of people know. I mean, the likes of Rosebank College, Abbott's College as well and Crawford College as well under their belt, and they run and manage those private school platforms and operations, and they've been making a lot of money in the space, just as Cura has also been making a lot of money in the space. But as life gets more difficult for consumers, they're saying that they're seeing a trend where those that are exiting the country to go live elsewhere, that's where they lose some of their students, as well as parents that can't really afford some of the prices that they have. We do know in South Africa the trend is that quality education is in the private sector, and people go to the private sector to try and get that education. But when things go wrong in terms of the economy, like we're seeing now, and unemployment is rife, a lot of households also struggling under that belt, and it's seeing them lose a lot of students into the mid-fee sector, a sector they say they're trying to go into as well in order to grab those people. So they're trying to look at families that are in the mid-tier in terms of earning and provide products for them, but also a venture into the rest of Africa. I mean, they've got a 71% stake in Kenya, and they're also going to
opened a school in Kenya, haven't they?
Definitely. They're going to introduce Crawford College International in Kenya as well, and they've been given a management contract in Uganda, and also opened Rosebank side colleges in Bloemfontein and Pietermaritzburg. So the business, yes, struggling a bit now, but they're saying they've got solutions to that.
Got to spend money to make money, I suppose, is what
they know
the
the
approach
game
that they're
better.
making. I'm speaking internationally on the international front today. News that the continent's biggest economies are struggling to grow. That's not big news, surely.
It's big news in a sense that when you look at the likes of Nigeria, who Statistics Office released their growth numbers, it showed a bit of concern there because they went from 9.3%, I think, in the first quarter, and now have gone down to 1.5% of growth in the first quarter. We need these big economies in the continent to grow for the rest of the continent to connect. We do know we're trying to have a free trade area between countries on the continent, so the more foreign exchange within the continent, the better. And the problem with Nigeria is that they're not getting that foreign exchange because of the prices in Brent crude. But another positive thing for the Nigerian economy is that there's other sectors now that are pulling the economy up. It's not that it's not growing, it's just growing at a slower rate. And they're going into now manufacturing, construction, and as well as electricity, something they've been struggling with for quite a long time.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but President Buhari has put in a lot of money to try and get those sectors up, but agriculture also down. But the biggest money spinner, which is Brent crude, which brings 9% to GDP, not really pulling its weight. And, it is important for Nigeria because that's how they get to the foreign exchange. When people buy Brent crude from Nigeria, then that's how they get to invest more money in the economy. But also the central bank coming in and saying they're willing to borrow money to bigger companies in the country for cheaper money, which lower interest rates, if one would put it that way, just so the economy could be spurred on. And I think it's a move in the right direction, but also the next time elections come around, I mean, people will be looking at President Buhari's scorecard in terms of growing the economy. But I think one can give him a few points for getting Nigeria out of that recession that they experienced in 2016.
It always comes back to politics, doesn't it?
Definitely.
We thank you for your time. Mateo Kuripe bringing us the very latest talking points in the world of business, both here in South Africa and abroad. Coming up,